How do you think Michael got his name? Like, do you think he was trying to tell people his name, or like he said you
Yeah.
could call me Mikey, and then like some guy was like, Mikey what? Which one is he? The Michael.
Michael.
Some shit.
You know, you got Fat Michael.
He got his name because I watched a YouTube video of some like American guy talking about Grupa Amerika, and every time he mentions his name, he says it differently and horribly wrong. It's something like he says Joko and boom, bro. Every time it has nothing to do with his name. So I guess he was like, okay, my name is Michael.
Yeah, just call me Michael. You fucking idiots.
I like Michael. I think it sounds like a pop star or something. I like it. I was thinking about names also because of what you were just sending me there on the old chat. I was thinking about like, you remember that old Key and Peele sketch? Of course you do. It's famous. The one with all like the NFL players' names that get increasingly ridiculous. You know.
Yeah.
There really should be an 09A version of this. No, where they just have like one after the other introducing themselves like this.
Yeah.
My name's Fenris Grundle.
Yes.
I'm Saturnius Baphones. I think,
and then the ways that all those guys that take on like Sanskrit names, like watching them try to pronounce their own, like names that they've given themselves. Well, yeah, you know, Michael.
Fucking
Michael.
All right, welcome to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Yeah.
Ray, we've been actually calling him for
That's true.
some time, right?
That's true. Uh-oh.
Ray Emanuel.
That's what we call it.
God.
Aggressive policing policies.
It's also organized crime.
Yes.
Connected guy.
All right, Ray. What do we got today? What's going on?
Well, I mean, this is. I think it's extremely interesting, actually. We're talking about an organized crime group, Grupa Amerika. So this will be our second. This will be SOPOranos Part 2 episode, and with this we'll finish our sub arc. You know, that stretch from the Serbian National Defense Black Hand to SOPO, and now organized crime. And I mean, it's a pretty amazing story. And well, so do you remember when we were guests on Radio Warner? With what year was that?
1987,
something like this.
Something like this. Yeah.
So when we did that 2 Radio Warner nerd episodes in the late 80s, there were 2 of them, and we talked about this very strange Serbian paramilitary from the 90s and the early 2000s called the Red Berets, who were actually like a death squad of the Serbian deep state.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a long story. We did 2 episodes because, like, you know, it's there's a lot of stuff there too, and it's and I think eventually we'll talk about that topic on our own podcast. So when we talked about that on Radio Warner, the 2 episodes were kind of centered, like the real kind of heart of those episodes was the assassination in 2003 of Zoran Đinđić, the Prime Minister of Serbia.
Right.
And so I want to start with that. And so this is like, you know, we went through 100 years of this history from 1903 to 2003 from 2 assassinations of the heads of state or governments of Serbia, King Alexander and then Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić, like exactly 100 years later, by 2 kind of deep state connected groups that I think we kind of showed in this sub-arc. There is some kind of thread that connects these different deep state connected organized crime groups. So what we talked about was the Red Berets, as I said, but also the connection they had with an organized crime group called the Zemun Gang, which was recruited by Legia, the commander of the Red Berets, who was highly positioned in the Serbian state security, the intelligence agency that we talked about many times in this arc. And he recruited in the late 90s the Zemun Gang, like around 98, to be a group controlled by him that would, assassinate people that the regime, the Milosevic regime at that point wanted to be assassinated. Because, UDBA, the Yugoslav and then Serbian state security, they had this long practice of recruiting criminals to do some work for them. This sure. has been going on for decades. But, okay, so that's what we talked about. But there is this strange thing. And this is, so Zoran Đinđić was assassinated in March of 2003. But a few months earlier, like I think this was like in the fall of 2002, almost the same thing happened. Like what happened in March of 2003 when Đinđić was assassinated was the second time that such a thing happened. Except the first time he wasn't actually assassinated. But months before that, there was lots of talk in the media and arrests of a criminal group, organized crime group in Belgrade, for wanting to kill Đinđić. And there was a narrative that was put in the media that was almost exactly the same as the one from March of 2003. So it was kind of weird. It was like, I don't know how many people who went through that really remember all the details, but it's weird because now when you remember it, it's almost kind of dreamlike. The same thing happened twice with some differences.
Right.
And what was different was then, unlike in the successful assassination, the organized crime group involved in the earlier attempts some months before that it was not the Zemun Gang. It was a different group than the media and cops explained at the time. This is a group. So this first group that tried to do this, we were told at the time by the media and the cops, it was a group called Maka's group, and it was called like this because it was led by one Željko Maksimović Maka. And this, they were arrested in 2002. They were also accused and charged of successfully assassinating a general of the police called Boško Buha.
Oh, right.
And then there was like this operation where they were like surveilled and they were listened on, and like there was many recordings of their conversations over the phone and so on. And this was the first time that such a case was prosecuted in Serbian courts, that evidence were like tapes of their conversations. And what the prosecution said was that the tapes showed that they were conspiring to do terrorism, to kill the prime minister, but also many other politicians, to install into power this guy called Koštunica, who was, the main political rival of Đinđić, and so on. So it was very, very similar to what happened in 2003. Only the group that was supposedly doing this was a different group, and it was not only a different group, it was a group that was the enemy of the Zemun Gang. And what is even stranger is that at the time, so the Zemun Gang and the Red Berets were partially part of the state, and they had their own people in the state security at the time. So they were actually a part of the effort to arrest this Maka's group at the time, because they had cops working for them. Some of them were, state security people as well. The Zemun Gang had, like, basically the leader of that group is also the head of the, main deep state paramilitary, and they have many cops working for them, and also people still inside the state security who work for them, so they get information and so on. They have access. So apparently they also were a part of the interrogation of, like, when these people were arrested from Maka's group. They were, like, some claimed even tortured by members of the Zemun Gang together with cops and so on. Basically Zemun Gang was kind of using their state connections to try to get rid of their main competition in organized crime in Serbia, is one way to look at it. So, the conversations between them were kind of, they used lots of slang, and also slang specific to their own organized crime group, so it was difficult to really understand what they were saying. But the prosecutors and cops kind of were sure that they, figured out the code and that they were really planning to assassinate the prime minister and many other people. And then actually, so Maka himself, the leader of the group, was never arrested. Actually, he escaped and has been not seen since then. Since 2003, he is somewhere. No one knows where he is. But a few other people from his gang were arrested. And there was a trial. And then actually in the middle of that, Djindjic was actually assassinated by another group who hated the group that was already in jail. And, after some time, the judges actually concluded that there was not enough evidence against Maka's group. They will let go to defend themselves, from outside of the prison. And then they all escaped. And since then are somewhere, no one knows where. So this is like a part of the story that's very strange, and it's difficult to really understand it, and no one is completely sure what was going on here. But it's even stranger than that. So one thing that makes this even stranger, and I'm going to mention this only just as a kind of a curious detail, was that many people in the Maka's group, Maka himself as well, were Freemasons. So he was he was a friend of a famous Serbian painter called Tapi, who was like a Freemasonry enthusiast and was like a grandmaster in some of the lodges, and he kind of introduced them to that, made them members. But Tapi was also a very interesting and specific guy, because he never studied art. He was kind of self-taught and became quite a successful, well-known painter even outside of Yugoslavia. But what was specific about him was that he was like a very good forger, and that he did, in that capacity, he did work both for the organized crime and for the Yugoslav deep state since the 80s. And was allegedly part even of some of, various shenanigans that UDBA did in the 80s, sometimes targeting the enemy emigration, and he would make false documents for their agents who were often criminals and so on. Yeah.
Wow. And his parents said his art degree would be good for nothing.
No, he
didn't study art.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. You just said that. Yeah.
And so he actually died after, I think, Djindjic was killed. He was one of the many people who were arrested, and he died in a police station. I think he had a heart attack. Tapi, the painter, did. But yeah, he was connected to this Maka's group very intimately, and there was this Freemasonry dimension to it, which is not the first time we mentioned Freemasonry. We mentioned it also, when we're talking about the Black Hand, because the Black Hand people were also Freemasons, and they kind of had their own lodge 100 years before this. So, it's just an interesting and a little bit bizarre detail there. But what is even more weird is that later on, we found out, the public found out, we were told that Maka's group was actually just a small part of a much larger organized crime group. And we learned that they were actually called Grupa Amerika, the America group. And that they are the most successful and dangerous and the most serious Serbian organized crime group that ever existed, and probably the most long-lasting. By that point, existed for decades, which is unusual for Serbian organized crime groups.
Right, because a lot of these clans that were emerged in the 90s kind of burned themselves out rather quickly. I mean, a lot of them they were killing each other left and right, and yeah.
So apparently, Maka's group was just one cell in this larger and kind of enigmatic group. But we already know about some of this history, because it is the most long-lasting group, as we said, but we know about their beginnings because we already talked about it. The beginnings were in the late 1970s, early 80s in Hell's Kitchen, New York.
Yeah.
And they were, probably started by Boško Radonjić, also called Hugo, the member of the allegedly Irish-American group, the Westies, which we learned had many non-Irish members, including Yugoslavs, and Boško was not the first a guy with the nickname Hugo to be a member of the Westies. So we talked about this. Boško Radonjić, later on called Hugo, left Yugoslavia in 1970. He went to America, settled in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. He became a member of the Serbian anti-communist terrorist group called SOPO, and was also involved with organized crime, and specifically with the Westies, as I just mentioned.
And in turn, the Gambinos, right?
Yes.
Because he set up John Gotti's trial.
Exactly. Yes.
Because the Westies themselves weren't as important as their connection to the Gambinos.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, we kind of stated in the last episode that they were pretty much a
glorified crew.
Yes, a crew inside of the Gambino family, and that their leader, Jimmy Coonan, was basically a capo in the Gambino family. But then he went to prison, and Boško Radonjić became the leader of the Westies. And was, as you said, closely connected to John Gotti and so on, and had to leave because of this, some witness tampering, and exactly to be more precise, he was accused of tampering with the jury in the John Gotti trial, so he had to leave America in 1992 and went back to Serbia or Yugoslavia.
It was a good time, perfect time to go back.
Yeah.
For a criminal, at least.
But there was a few other Serbs or Yugos around there at the time, and two of them were younger associates of Boško Radonjić, who served as his bodyguards for a while. They were best friends, one called Mileta Miljanić and the other called Zoran Jakšić. So they were best friends. Mileta was born in Bosnia. He was a Serb from Bosnia. Zoran Jakšić was born in Serbia. And they came to New York in the probably early 80s. And were connected to Boško Radonjić and became actually members of SOPO. So we know that they were members of SOPO because they are mentioned as such, but very briefly in some of the books that we covered, written, for example, by Nikola Kavaja. And some books about Nikola Kavaja even has photographs of these two guys together with Kavaja and with Boško Radonjić, and it is always stated that they were members of SOPO.
And they were much younger, right? Than
both
Radonjić and Kavaja.
Yes. Mileta was born in 1960, and I guess Zoran Jakšić is of similar age. So they were also involved with kind of small-time crime activities. I think in the middle of the 80s, they were arrested because of some credit card fraud stuff, and they went to prison in America for the first time. There is also some difference between them, between these two best friends. Mileta is a much more kind of secretive guy, and Jakšić is much more of a risk taker. And sometimes, Mileta is not really satisfied by what the risk that his best friend Zoran is taking.
You're describing the classic sitcom The Odd Couple right now.
Yes, right. Yes. I mean, you can even see this in this early, arrest of theirs in America. Is Mileta, I think, got 3 years of prison, served, I think, around 20 months, and then was let out. Jakšić got 5 years of prison, served only a year, then was let out on parole, but immediately fucked up something and was sent back to prison.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to picture their house together. Jakšić was the messy one, right? Leaving socks everywhere and fucking
probably, yeah.
Not doing the dishes,
Jakšić is also a stereotypical Hugo. He's very, very big and very, very tall. So you kind of notice him even if he tries not to be noticed. You cannot notice him.
I think that's one of the things that made him stand out in his later career.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, exactly.
He goes to South America and he's the biggest motherfucker in the room.
Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
And Mileta is or also known as Michael, or as Michael.
Michael, my favorite.
He's like a kind of a not outstanding at all, and he's quite intelligent. I mean, both of them are, but Michael or Mileta is like kind of very intelligent, and they say he's like able to get along with any crowd of people, and then most people, when they encounter him, would never say that he's a leader of an organized crime group. Lives sort of an ordinary life in New York City now. But for a time, they came back, as their kind of mentor, Boško Radonjić, they as well came back to Serbia in the early 1990s. So at some point, they, together with their mentor, they started this other group, mostly relying on or other organized crime group, not the Westies, but connected to it, which was mostly relying on the Yugos, the various Yugos living in America and in Yugoslavia itself and in different countries all around the world, but not exclusively Yugos. And they were given this name later on by the Serbian state security, which called them Grupa Amerika. It was not something that they ever, never called themselves that. Same as the Westies, it was a name given to them. So at some point, we don't know exactly when, late 80s, early 90s, these two guys became effectively the leaders of the group. Although Mileta is sometimes characterized as being like the kind of the brains. So maybe like, in the Italian mob, this would be something like a consigliere or something like it has such a role. But when they moved their operations also with Mileta, the group heavily focused on the cocaine trade and developed their activities in that direction and became one of the most prominent groups in that sort of business these days. But when they moved their operation to Serbia in 1990s, there was another guy, another younger associate of Boško Radonjić, who was the head of their group in Serbia in the 90s. It's a guy called Vojislav Raičević, better known under his nickname Voja Amerikanac or Voja the American. So Voja was kind of unlike these other two, proteges of Boško Radonjić. He was like a very super violent kind of psycho guy. And in the 90s, the group really started killing lots of people in Serbia. And it is said often that Voja the American would even kill for stupid reasons people and so on, but he was never charged or arrested or prosecuted for any of the murders. Some of them he did himself, but the group killed many people at the time. So what happened was that Boško Radonjić himself and then Voja the American and Michael and his friend Zoran Jakšić forged close ties with the Serbian state security of the 1990s, of the Milošević regime. And even, Kavaja says that he had Nikola Kavaja, the hijacker, Serbian terrorist, anti-communist that we covered. He said, Boško Radonjić was my best friend, but I never supported his cooperation with the Serbian state security because, they are all communists and so on.
Right.
So Boško Radonjić was specifically very close, and the whole group, America, was very close to the head of the Serbian state security in the 90s until 98, a guy called Jovica Stanišić that we mentioned before as well.
Right.
A very kind of enigmatic guy, still in the news. I will say more about it a bit later.
So, I mean, Kavaja really kept the ideological line down, whereas, Boško was here to make some money and saw some very good opportunities to do so.
Yes. So there is also an interesting person there that was connected with Grupa Amerika in the 1990s. It's a Montenegrin guy called Boško Bojović. And Boško Bojović was actually the head of the Montenegrin state security and was a loyal guy to Jovica Stanišić. And he is basically, on different occasions by different people, it is stated that he was basically a member or the real leader of Grupa Amerika in 1990s, Serbia and Montenegro. many of these gangsters are actually like Serbs from Montenegro or Montenegrin origin. But these Boško, so at the time, Serbia and Montenegro were like a federal state. There were two republics in a federation, which was still called Yugoslavia, but it only had two republics. Everyone else left Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
So each of the republics had its own state security or intelligence agency. So this Boško Bojović was the head of the Montenegrin one, but he was completely loyal to the head of the Serbian state security, Jovica Stanisic. So there is even a recording. So I have to say, most of the things I'm telling you now are based on researches done by journalists from three groups. This would be a group called Investigates from Czech Republic, a group called Krik from Serbia, and also a third one called Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. So they did, all three groups, they did some investigation together about Grupa Amerika. We'll post a link to one of their articles so you can find more information there. So these journalists tell us that there actually is an audio recording of Marko Milošević, and made in 1997. Marko Milošević was the son of Slobodan Milošević, and he, had ambitions in the 1990s to develop his own business in Serbia, specifically involved with like cigarette smuggling. And this is something that we talked about in the Radio War Nerd episodes there, that the cigarette smuggling was kind of a way for, even back to Yugoslav era, like 70s or 60s, for the UDBA, the Yugoslav State Security, to get money for their like black ops, basically. CIA did, the heroin and cocaine business, and, UDBA was doing illegal cigarette smuggling across the Adriatic and so on. Yeah. So when in the 1990s, when, Serbia was under international sanctions and embargo, which was quite radical, in some sense, the whole state switched to this kind of black ops model of doing economy. And, cigarette smuggling was not something that, of course, it was heavily done by state security at the time, but also by many other people. And then there were different factions inside of the regime who will control this business. And apparently, Milošević's son, Marko Milošević, was in conflict with some parts of the state security, like, for example, with Jovica Stanisic, who will control this business. And there was like many assassinations happening in 90s Serbia, which was connected to these wars between different factions of state security and organized crime and the Milošević regime concerning cigarette smuggling. So on this recording, Marko Milošević is talking about Grupa Amerika, and he says how they are under control of this Boško Bojović, the Montenegrin state security guy who works for Jovica Stanisic. And so this is in 1997.
Does he call them specifically Grupa Amerika?
I don't know. Maybe he does because, Marcos certainly had some information from, the state security, and that was the state security name for them, which they gave them. So I don't know if he does. I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe he doesn't. He mentions, the group led by the Voja American, let's say. I think that he refers to them like that, and he says that guy works for Boško Bojović, and Boško Bojović works for Jovica Stanisic. And he says that in 97 and in 98, Jovica Stanisic is, he's kicked out. He's not the head of the state security anymore. He's replaced. So, what was going on there was that Grupa Amerika had a deal with Jovica Stanisic. They were doing their business. They were doing the state, black ops, also economical dealings, cigarette smuggling, and so on. But they were also assassinating people for the state and the regime, and specifically Jovica Stanisic and his, deep state. So what happened there, I think, was that at some point Milošević started, the president, doubting his main state security guy, Jovica Stanisic. He was kicked out of the regime in some sense. And with him, partially, this group that was connected to him lost some influence. And this is also, the period when Legia, who was a part of the state security and kind of the leader of the paramilitary wing of state security, had more autonomy because the big boss was gone. And at that time, he recruited other criminals, the Zemun gang, to basically start doing the things for the state security that up to that point was done by Grupa Amerika. So they were competition also in that way. They were not only competition, in like street stuff, drug smuggling, and so on. They were actually competitors in terms of their connections with the deep state and different parts of the deep state and the work they were doing for them. So it's a bit complicated because you have you have Legia and the Red Berets, then you have Jovica Stanisic and Grupa Amerika, then you have the Milosevic family with their own agendas and connections. So it's a whole thing going on there. It's not one deep state. There's like different factions and different organized crime factions connected to them.
Chaos.
Yeah. So Maka, we didn't forget him. He was an important part of this group, in the 90s. Maybe just so he's the guy, who was in 2002 accused of leading a group that wanted to kill the prime minister and then kind of, disappeared and no one has seen him since. So Maka, he was first arrested when he was very young in 1987, and he was arrested in Switzerland with a false passport. Okay. Which is, pretty, interesting.
Good start.
Also, he's the son of a important guy in the military intelligence in Yugoslavia. So, he was probably one of these kind of, street hoodlums, kind of problematic kids who was, often they were sons of military officers or police and so on, and who are then, okay, you're going to be a bad boy, well, at least, do stuff for the state.
Yeah.
This is the story of Arkan, for example, of many of these other guys.
You could see the world, go out, go to Switzerland, Austria, do your thing, but, the agency will make a man out of you or something.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's exactly it. So Maka was caught as a kid, in the morgue of the medical faculty, using his dad's gun to shoot the corpses there. Like he was practicing that.
Amazing.
So,
man, I don't know if I should keep this in or not, but I once had the displeasure of teaching some children of military officers in Eastern Europe, and they're horrible. They're just fucking awful. None of this surprises me at all. Yeah.
No, of course not. And this is not only a ordinary military officer. This is military intelligence,
Yes.
I mean, Michael Milosevic was kind of much the same way. He wanted to be a bad boy, but he was just a spoiled, daddy's boy, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
It was really funny. He was very violent, kind of put on this very macho image, but then there's some funny intercepted recordings of him talking to his dad, and he's like, "Dad, send me money. I need to replace all my teeth. I don't like how my teeth look, and replace them."
Yeah.
Son, don't be stupid, but okay, here.
I think he actually wanted to do operation on his ears because he thought that his ears.
He did do his ears and his teeth.
Wow. All right.
I remember this recording because I think it was one of either the plastic surgeon or the dentist was a Croat, and he said that he looked like Tudjman.
No.
And that he was fascistically effeminate.
Wow.
Whoa.
It's kind of
a new one for me.
Yeah. That stuck in my mind. It was just like, what?
Yeah.
All right, Michael Milosevic.
I want all of this to be a TV show so bad. These are all just classic characters here.
These guys are already kind of venerated as they are. So
I don't want to venerate them. It's a comedy. You know what I mean? It's like comedy.
I think that, we should include a picture of Voya the American at least.
Oh, yeah.
Because, this guy, just appearance-wise, is fantastic.
Yeah, he had his style, which was very 90s, but it was even too much for the other gangsters. I watched an interview with some gangster who was saying, wow, why the American? He was really, doing it too much. The style, he was, the way he was dressing.
A very curly mullet. And
let me check it out.
Yeah.
Aviator glasses and leather jackets and shit.
Yeah. So Maka was, as a young gangster in 1995 in Belgrade, working for the Voya the American and, Grupa Amerika at the time. He was, he killed a cop in the middle of the day in the street in the center of Belgrade. Apparently, he was showing a gun to his friend, had a new gun, and then like there was a cop there who wanted to arrest him, who was in panic, and then Maka just killed him, shot him there in the street, and also wounded another cop. Never spent a day in jail for that.
Damn.
Wow. That was that. Obviously, he worked for the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Killing a cop in broad daylight.
I mean,
pretty brazen for even.
Yeah,
you do
I'm
work
thinking
for the state.
he's got to be doing something real important for them then, like or holding on to something.
So in around that time, I think also in '97, Voya the American disappeared. The consensus is he was probably killed, especially because the president's son didn't like his business and so on. So he disappeared. He was killed, and then the Grupa Amerika wants to avenge him, so they started like a killing spree on their own. Voya the American's brother, who is still alive and a member of the group, he organized a meeting of the group. Was attended by also state security people like that Bojovic guy from Montenegro, and they decided, who they want to kill and how many people and so on to avenge Voya the American. So they kidnapped one gangster in Belgrade. They took him to a villa and tortured him there until he said who were the people responsible for assassinating Voya the American. Then they killed him and dismembered him with a chainsaw. And then they started the killing spree and killed many people. So this is the time when the Zemun gang is being recruited by Legia, and then they start to kill other gangsters in order to become the main group in Serbia and so on. It's a different story. But yeah, it's complicated, and there's a lot of gangster stuff going on and lots of killing. But the only reason that we know about Grupa Amerika was that one of their guys flipped in 2001 and started talking to the cops. And he said, the history of the group. He talked about Michael and Zoran Jakšić and how, Michael or Mileta is the brains of the group, and what's the role that Zoran has and how they're doing their cocaine business and who are other members. He also talked about Voya the American, about Maka, about Boško Radonjić specifically, about that Montenegrin state security guy. He gave a lot of information. And I think the last name of the snitch was Laskovic, so his nickname was Lucky. Like in Serbo-Croatian, they would refer to him as Lucky. But the stupid cops, they gave a code name for the informant, which was Srećko, which is the translation of the word lucky.
Yeah.
And then, so because these people were heavily connected with, still, even in the early 2000s, probably now still connected to Serbian state security, they got someone there to, get information from the cops. And he told to Grupa Amerika, well, the informant, his code name is Srećko, and then they figure out, it's Lucky, And
they're probably looking at the list and they're like, "Do you think the cops are that stupid?" Well, let's see.
Yeah, but this was years later. I think so. The informant started talking to the cops in 2001, and I think they found out about him much later. I think this was like in 2009.
Oh wow.
And Lucky was killed in 2010, like in Belgrade, shot 3 times in the head. So yes, that's what happened to him. But he said a lot of stuff, and this was like something that Michael was like very shocked when he heard about that this guy was a snitch, because there is actually a recording of the conversation between Zoran Jakšić and Mileta, Michael, talking about this when they figure out who the informant is, and Mileta or Michael is very hurt by this, because this guy is like a family friend that he knows for many years. But by the end of the conversation, they decide they have to kill him. And Jakšić said something like, "Spies deserve to be killed," or something like this. Spies in this snitches, he means.
Fair enough. That's the game, right?
Yeah. So another reason why we know now so much about this group is because the Italian police and prosecutors were investigating them In 2009, I think they started, and they did a big investigation that lasted for a year. A prosecutor called, I think, Marcello Musso was leading this operation, and he talked later to the journalist and said some things about their findings about the group and so on. At the time, so the group is, what we found out from this investigation is that the group has only around 15 core members, but it has around 100 associates who live on, almost every continent. And Italians were kind of, at least by this Musso, prosecutor, from what he says, were kind of amazed when by the things they found out about the group. So they surveilled them. They had, recording devices, also video recordings. At the time, they were spending some time in Milano. The Grupa Amerika did. They both, Michael had a flat in Milano. He was visited by Zoran Jakšić and so on. So there are many videos of what they were doing. And they were amazed by how well they are organized and by how many resources they have. So this Italian guy says that they had basically kind of a paramilitary type of organization. They have a very clear chain of command. They're very well organized, and they have lots of money, and so they are capable of quickly establishing a base in any city where they want to, which they often do. But at the same time, they're very flexible and can just disappear if they figure out someone is aware of their operations, so can just very quickly move to a different country and so on. And what is also kind of a characteristic about them is that they are very open to collaborating with other groups, which they often do. All kinds of groups in different parts of the world, which is also something that, it made me think about what we talked about in the last subject, how the first version of the Westies, led by that Mickey Spillane guy, didn't want to work with the Italian mob and were kind of pushed out by the other Irish gangsters like Coonan, the future leader of the Westies, because he was very open to working with other groups and sharing the profits and so on. I think that and this Italian guy says that this is one of the characteristics, which he says is not always the case with organized crime groups, is that they are very, very willing to work with, all kinds of groups, which I will mention some of them. So maybe it's something, kind of a heritage that they have since, the days of Hell's Kitchen and Jimmy Coonan. I mean, and they are in direct, still, we mentioned that they are in contact with Jimmy Coonan, who is spending, his life in prison. And they're kind of like Michael is calling him on the phone and supporting him and so on. So there is a kind of a Westies heritage there.
And I mean, in general, this kind of paramilitary setup and this network probably is inherited largely from SOPO, no?
Well, yes, this is now, this is very interesting because
these emigre groups were always also ready to be on the run to, quickly set up a base in another city and, be mobile if needed. And they were everywhere, right? I mean, SOPO has, kind of starts in France, but then, it's in the US, Australia, South America, all over the place.
Exactly. And this is, so the Italians actually tried to arrest them. And Miljanic was arrested when he was on flight, which is very interesting. This is also how earlier Boško Ranorić was arrested in America. He was on a flight from Belgrade to Thessaloniki that stopped in Rome, and on that occasion, the Italian police arrested him. And the prosecutor wanted him to be, charged as the leader of the organized crime group, but he was not able to, do that. Some other people were, I guess, against that decision, and so Michael was only charged for 10 kilos of cocaine that was found in Venice or something like this. And he got 7 years of prison for that. Then it was lowered to 6 years. He was sent to a prison in Italy, and he was doing gardening in the prison. And then in 2014, he was allowed to exit prison. He was on this kind of half-open regime in prison. So most of the time he was able to spend outside of the prison. And after 3 months, he disappeared. And he escaped back to New York City. And the Italian state never even requested for him to be extradited from Italy. From America to Italy.
Wow.
And the prosecutor, like the Italian prosecutor that spoke to journalists, he also says that they were amazed by how much connections this group had with the Serbian police and also the Serbian state security, which they found out through their investigation. But he also thinks he basically said that he thinks they have protection from the CIA, is what the Italian prosecutor said. Which is very interesting. And it's also interesting that none of these journalists ever mention SOPO when they talk about this.
Yeah, because SOPO they do mention connection too, right? Well, but the part of it anyway, at least.
Well, they mentioned Radonjić's connection to the CIA, but not SOPO in general,
right?
As being a CIA supported organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, both Michael, and Zoran Jakšić were members of SOPO. And the same people who, gave that information in their books, who were leaders of SOPO, also openly said that SOPO worked for the CIA. And, all the actions they did were sanctioned by them. So, it's pretty clear that, there is a very well-established connection between them and the CIA. It's not really that mysterious.
They were also apparently being trained as paramilitaries by UK intelligence, too, at some point, right? With the mixed service and all that shit.
Well, okay, these are not. This is like now the history of the larger organization, Serbian National Defense, that the SOPO people came out of. I mean, which is a good illustration how this type of relationship existed with this community for many decades. But we're talking about now these two concrete guys who were members of a group basically organized by the CIA as a terrorist group and now are doing criminal activity. And some other people who are probably not even aware of SOPO, or at least don't mention it, conclude that there is something fishy about their relationship with the CIA. So I think they're probably, I think SOPO is a big part of it, yeah. But for some reason not mentioned that much.
Fishy.
Yeah. I mean, it is, because it does explain a lot of this prehistory to the gang, right?
Yeah.
And how they're all connected, how they have intelligence connections. And I mean, also, of course, they established the connection with Stanisic and the, Serbian secret police. But then Stanisic himself also worked with the CIA.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, okay. Yeah, that's what I mean. So they were the organized crime faction that worked for Jovica Stanisic's faction of the Serbian state security, and Jovica Stanisic is currently being tried for war crimes in the Hague Tribunal. And through that trial there, we found out that he actually worked for the CIA. So there was a former ambassador of the UK to Yugoslavia. Let me see if I know his name. Okay, I can't find his name now. He's actually a sir. So this sir...
I was going to say that as a joke, and then I thought to myself, I can't keep making that joke. It's too obvious. Not every fucking ambassador is going to be Sir something. But I should have said it.
Sir Ivar Roberts.
Great.
Former UK ambassador to Yugoslavia. He was a witness at the Stanisic trial there, I think, in The Hague, and he stated how Stanisic was a CIA agent there, but that he can't say more because it's like a state secret or something like this. But the CIA basically sent a letter during Stanisic's trial in which, to the tribunal there, which was almost like a recommendation letter from the CIA saying how Stanisic is a good guy who did good things in the 90s. And so,
Which when Stanisic was, I guess, working with the CIA is when he was orchestrating some of the worst things that happened in all of those wars.
Yes. And was controlling this organized crime group.
Yeah.
That's good work from the CIA.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty well established there is a connection there. So, Zoran Jakšić, so Mileta, he lives in New York City, in Ridgewood, Queens. Kind of a working class neighborhood in an ordinary house there, and there's his name is on the door. He's living some kind of an ordinary life. In the meantime, he's like best buddy Zoran Jakšić. His base of operations is Latin America, and he's very mobile. He's all over the world, But different Latin American countries are kind of where he's mostly at. And he also uses like more than 40 different identities, has all kinds of passports and so on.
Wow.
We know this because he was arrested in 2016 in Peru.
Yeah.
And this was like an operation by the police there, who were like at first not even aware who this guy is. He's like some giant European guy walking around Lima, and they were like, who the fuck is this guy? He also uses different identities every time he has to identify himself. So they were very confused by who this guy is, but he was, connecting with the drug traffickers there and had meetings with them and so on. And after some time, they actually figure out who the guy is, and were ready to arrest him and I think they found like almost at that point, almost like a ton of cocaine that was connected to him there, and they were ready to arrest him. What is interesting about Grupa Amerika is that the Italian prosecutor said that they're almost kind of a service agency in the drug business. So they have almost a monopoly on the drug trade, on the transport across the ocean between Latin America and Europe.
Yeah.
This is what they do.
Which is really one of the most amazing parts of what they do. I mean, that's a brilliant part of the trade to secure. It's one of the hardest things, right?
Yes.
Is transporting like cocaine from, one continent to another across the ocean. And they have that game on lock. And so you can imagine how much money is at stake there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they're ultimately then responsible for most of the cocaine coming into Europe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is fucking crazy.
That's exactly right. And so that's what they do. They connect the producers in Latin America, and then the traffickers and like the sellers in Europe. So they don't do any kind of street stuff and so on. Their business is transporting big amounts of cocaine over the ocean. But also what is characteristic for them is they don't, unlike many other groups, they don't transport tons at once. They do small packages, sometimes even like 100 kilo only, or a few hundred and so on. So Zoran Jakšić being arrested with almost a ton was kind of an uncharacteristic thing. They're much more careful with that. They were using, Montenegrin sailors and various kind of Yugo people in ships that are sailing across the ocean to do the work for them, but also kind of shockingly, kind of submarines that they made themselves or someone made for them. Yeah. So they're doing that as well. So,
but the kind of brilliant. Sorry, one of the brilliant things about using the sailors and for like doing the smaller quantities is that's how that kind of stuff can slip under the radar so much. So they did do work, I think, with ships that are owned and flagged by Montenegro, for example, and then other governments have a hard time fucking with that. But then if you're also just a regular sailor, you pick up a shipment wherever in South America, and it's a relatively compact, small amount. You take it back to your cabin, and then they tell you to just throw it overboard at a specific point when you're however many miles off the coast of, let's say, Spain or Italy or whatever, wherever your ship is moving, and you just throw that overboard with in the way that they prepared it for you. And then somebody comes and picks it up, and and if it gets lost, it's not enough to be like it's not like you lost tons and tons of cocaine, but a few, whatever, 100 kilos or something.
Exactly,
it's not ultimately that much.
I bet the sharks in that territory are terrifying. No.
Well, I mean these shipments do wash up on the shores in Europe like all the time. Like somebody will just take a stroll on the beach and come across like 30 kilos of cocaine.
Yeah. You meant the sharks are terrifying because they're on cocaine or what?
Yeah, the sharks are on cocaine is what I'm trying to say. That you should.
They're sharks, but on cocaine.
On cocaine. Yes.
Okay, so he's. But interestingly, so 2016, Peru, cops are tailing Zoran Jakšić. What is interesting is that Mileta Miljanić, Michael's son, was in Peru then. This guy called Peter Miljanić, who was in Peru to learn the business from Uncle Zoran. And then the police recorded a conversation between them, which was in Serbo-Croatian, so they didn't understand it. They had to get a translation. So they sent the recording to the US, and it took a lot of time for them to translate that and send them back. And then what they found out when they got the translation was the Peter Miljanic, the young Miljanic, who they called the mute because he was not talking a lot. I guess he's discreet, like Dad is. He actually had the information that the police is about to arrest them, and he said to Zoran, like, we should split. And they almost got away, but Zoran Jakšić was arrested while trying to cross the border to Ecuador by using a fake passport and so on. So he was arrested and he got 25 years of prison. And at some point, while in prison, he was visited by a journalist.
Oh yeah, this is amazing. Yeah.
From one of these groups that I mentioned, and it's like she managed to visit him on like a day which they informally in the prison called Sex Day or something like this, because they allow prisoners to see their partners and also like sex workers. So she basically pretended to be a sex worker and went into the prison to see him. And when she went there, she told him she's a journalist, and at first he was like, "Oh, fuck off, I hate journalists," but then started talking to her. Didn't want to say anything about Grupa Amerika at all. He's smart. So, but it was a pretty amazing thing because he has like a very luxurious, fancy cell. She said it looked like a 90s or 80s disco. There was like black tiles and like tiger patterns everywhere on couches and like
white. He was like showing off to her too. He's like, you could get whatever you want. I could get whatever I want in here. Like bottle of whiskey, $100, and like plus tip.
He eats what he wants. He has a toilet in the cell. He has like white leather like cushions on the couch, which like has a tiger pattern on it and so on.
Wow.
Class. And it's pretty amazing. But you know what else? He's an intellectual. So Zoran Jakšić. So when he on one of his arrests before that, the police said they found notes on Nietzsche and Kant that he was making.
Worries me.
And now when this journalist visited him, he was like reading Seneca and talking about Seneca and making some awesome notes. So yeah, that's what's going on there.
Wow.
I think a lot of these Balkan mobster guys fancy themselves as intellectuals, though, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you see it a lot.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So in 2019, the prison found out that he's trying to escape, so they sent him to like a maximum security prison. But you know how he was trying to escape? There was like he was. No, probably not himself, but there was an organization that was like digging a tunnel underneath the prison to connect to like some house which was outside of prison somewhere. And apparently it is reported that he was doing this together with the Sinaloa cartel. Like they were they were a part of that operation. So, obviously connected with, for example, them. Also, I forget to mention, like when Miljanic was arrested in Italy, he was in the middle of arranging business with a Russian mob to traffic cocaine from Venezuela at the time. And there was like another good illustration how they operate. It's at some point, let me just see. This was, I think, the year was, well, I don't remember what the year was, but it was some years ago. So they were smuggling, they were trafficking cocaine on a ship called Senator, which in the middle of
they were trafficking cocaine on a ship called the SS Hunter Biden.
So an unfortunate thing happened to them was that in the middle of its travel, the Senator changed the owner. So when it stopped in the harbor in Durban, South Africa, the whole crew had to leave because the another crew was supposed to take charge of, and the people in the crew were taking care of the, also not such a huge amount. It was like 250 kilos of cocaine that was there. And so the crew that were supposed to take care of that had to leave. So, this is like, I think the time when the Italians were listening on their conversations. So, Michael and Zora are talking over the phone and they're like, what the fuck are we going to do? And then like Michael is, listen, I'm going to call Tsiga. So that's a nickname of a Serbian gangster who lives in Brazil. So they call this Serbian gangster in Brazil, and Ciga is like, okay, listen, don't worry. I have a guy in the Nigerian mafia. And so they call this guy in the Nigerian mafia, and they like in about a day they'll have a solution how to get the cocaine off that ship. And they were about to do it, but the South African police was quicker, and they actually got to that cocaine first. And a Croatian guy who was a part of the crew was arrested for that, and he was like an assistant cook on the senator. So yeah, that was like one of the guys working for them. So obviously, they are like have many Yugos working for them, not only Serbs, and
right.
So that's what happened.
True internationalists.
Yeah, totally.
Yugo internationalists.
I'll just call up my guy in Nigeria, and don't worry, we'll have that.
Yeah,
nice.
So Jakšić was actually like. I think in 2020, recently, he was like his prison time was like somehow overturned, and there was a retrial. So for a period, he was actually like in out of prison and like in house arrest. So it seemed that he will like be free, but then the retrial like came to the same conclusion. He got 25 years of prison again. So he's still in Peru in prison, and actually. Kind of uncharacteristically, to some degree, let's say, Michael is in prison now currently,
right?
And he was arrested, I think, in 2021. I think 21, yes, by the FBI. They arrested him in his Queens home, and they found like a gun on him. So he was arrested because like he didn't have a license for a gun, and then like I think served 16 months of prison for that, but he is still in prison because of another charge, and it's pretty ridiculous because he's still in prison because he has a company in New York called I think MDP Rebar Solutions, which is a construction company.
Yeah,
and they applied for government assistance in the COVID times.
Nice.
You could get something, and I guess they didn't have the right to this money, so he's in prison because of this, because he kind of do some kind of a COVID fraud or something like this,
which a lot of people did.
Yeah, and it's like $150,000 that they took from the state, and this is why he's still in prison.
Which is hilarious. That's literally nothing to him. I mean, these people are moving incalculable amounts of money.
Yeah, yes. I don't know why. Like they even applied for this money, but
I mean, this guy's always like do stupid shit like that in the end. They see like some opportunity to do a hustle, and they'll do it. I guess that's the mindset.
Yeah. So, but the FBI basically came to the conclusion that this is obviously some kind of a fake company, and that they're money laundering, because the only people who work in it's Michael and his family members, and you know who else? A Gambino family consigliere is like
okay. Bold move to apply for federal assistance to your money laundering business.
Yeah,
bold.
Yeah.
I mean, he was probably like, look, we've done so much work with like the CIA and stuff over the years. They've made money from us.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably where what's the name? James or Cahill, the union guy who was arrested recently in New York City.
Right. Yeah.
He's like in construction business, I think, and was like meeting with Gambino couples and also with Michael himself, and had a brother who was in the Westies and so on. So I think probably they were doing something together through this business, some money laundering, God knows what. So all of these connections are still there, from the Westies, Gambinos, but SOPO, obviously SOPO, but also the Nigerian mob, Russian mob. Sinaloa cartel, everyone,
anybody
fucking nuts.
That he was based up in Peru for a long time.
Yeah,
I guess a lot of them are up in Peru. So,
and most importantly, CIA. So
yes,
yeah. I think
without
I want to finish.
None of this would be possible.
Yes. So I want to finish with an interesting example of the CIA connection. So in 2003, both Michael and Zoran were charged for drug trafficking in the US. And a third guy who was charged with them was a Colombian guy called Efrain Eduardo Rodriguez. So in charge of this case was like a well-known prosecutor, usually prosecuting organized crime stuff, called Neil Barovsky. Mm-hmm. So what is interesting is, so this happened in 2003. This indictment is still active, but it's sealed for 20 years. Oh. Okay, already it's sealed. And so the journalists who were investigating this went to talk to this Neil Barovsky, the former prosecutor. Now he's in private practice. He's a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And they was talking like, what's going on with this? Why is it sealed? And what's the story with Michael and Zoran and so on? And Neil was like, I just can't remember. And he said, like, for the life of me, I just can't remember. And he said, like, because you can see that at some point the indictment was unsealed and then sealed again. And he said, I remember like unsealing it to like show it to a judge and then sealing it again. But for the life of me, I don't remember what's in it.
Yeah, literally for the life of him, because it tells.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that 3 months after this indictment was sealed, this prosecutor Barovsky started working on a case that made his career. He opened an investigation connected to cocaine trafficking against FARC, the Colombian, left paramilitary group. And so the investigation lasted for a few years, and in 2006 they started officially the indictment became public against FARC, and this was the biggest case or connected to drug trafficking in the history of the United States or something like this against FARC. And so also the guy who was charged with Zoran and Michael was a Colombian guy. And they asked this Barovsky prosecutor, is there any connection between these two things? And he was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think there was any connection.
Oh, yeah, right. So basically, SOPO stayed true to its anti-communist roots and threw FARC under the bus with their buddy who's, probably runs some right-wing death squad in Colombia.
Yes. I think that's what happened. Exactly. And the last thing the ex-prosecutor said to the journalist was they asked him something like, do you think they are informants? Do you think these people work for the government? And he said something basically, maybe, I don't know. What I can tell you for sure is that they're not my informants.
Okay.
And then the journalist said, well, do they possibly work for the DEA? The Drug Enforcement Agency? And the guy said or someone else.
Warmer.
It's another 3 letters.
Yeah.
Blink twice for yes.
Yeah. So that's the story. These guys are in prison now. Seems that Michael probably won't stay long there. Unless they decide to, unseal this indictment, which they probably won't do.
I wouldn't be surprised if Yaksic down in Peru got out at some point too.
Yeah, he was pretty close. Yeah, twice.
Yeah.
You ever worry, Ray, that there's a very good reason that people haven't been making the SOPO connection in public?
I don't know.
Should we? Did we fuck up? Did we?
I don't know.
We did something bad.
Listen, SOPO seem the most ridiculous groups of all that is involved in this. No.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Really though.
But ultimately they came out on top.
Yes.
Which is fascinating.
Yes. SOPO got FARC arrested. Yes.
Yeah. And made billions of dollars. It's insane. Bringing all the cocaine into Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. The people who are doing terrorism by buying a canister of gasoline at the gas station and then burning a diplomat's house in the middle of Brussels during the day are somehow now on the top of the cocaine trafficking business in the world.
Yeah, from stumbling around drunk and like wearing sombreros in Mexico trying to find Tito to, working with the Sinaloa cartel and making mad money.
Well, I think the most important thing is, it's the CIA connection. You can even, you can be a degenerate drunk, but if you work with the CIA, it probably gets you a better chance of succeeding than if you're not.
Yeah.
And Boško was really the liaison there between those two worlds then, between like the SOPO kind of intelligence connected world and then the world of organized crime. And then it's kind of a perfect storm. He goes back in 1992, best possible time for a well-connected criminal to go back to a state that is, increasingly engaged in crime for its economic survival. It's really a perfect mix there.
But also, still has a CIA connection.
And has a CIA connection.
And works for the head of the Milosevic state security, who also has a CIA connection. I mean, it's like...
Amazing. Yeah.
It's horrifying in so many ways.
Yes.
I mean, with the Grupa Amerika stuff, there's so much to it that the more you look, the more ridiculous it gets.
It is, yeah. I mean, they're. I mean, this was like just kind of a sketch of what they are, kind of as concise as I could made it. But there's many more things going on there, I think.
Ray and I, we were talking about this a while back. But if people like some of this kind of stuff, I was thinking it'd be kind of fun to return to some of these, either. Grupa Amerika type stuff on kind of random occasions. We'll just do it whenever we feel like it. And I also want to do a Pink Panther series eventually. So I think
cool.
I think that can be we can do it in different. We don't know how we want to do it. Like Boris had this idea of like occasionally doing like an episode on the Pink Panthers or something like this.
Yeah.
But it could be well connected to like a kind of an 80s, 90s Yugo arc, which would connect, this organized crime stuff with state security and the paramilitaries during the war and so on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's also a good context to talk more about Grupa Amerika and similar groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, these people even have a Pink Panther connection, but we didn't mention that. We'll mention it some other time. Yeah. The Pink Panthers are kind of the spectacular robbers of Yugo origin.
World's most successful jewel thieves.
Yeah.
Carry out the really, as you said, spectacular heists.
Also in different parts of the world. And,
all over the world. Very well organized. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Fun stuff. We're a true crime podcast now. We did it.
Yeah.
We made it to the top. All those guys are up at the top on the boards,
Yeah.
This is our ticket.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, CIA.
Well, I want to say one thing. It's pretty amazing that they have these groups even with while they're orchestrating like drug trafficking across the Atlantic and have a monopoly on it. They're doing with stuff with the Nigerian mob and the Sinaloa cartel and so on. There is still like a Facebook page of SOPO basically under a different name, and you can still find like both pictures of like Michael there, but also and of Boško Radonić and of Kavaja and all of these people that we mentioned, but also of Voja Tankosić and Apis. Like they are actually aware of this origin that they have,
right?
Which really kind of scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is alarming.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm just not going to think about it today. Anyway, I'm just going to avoid it.
Yeah, Voja Tankosić and Apis were the leaders of the Black Hand. If someone was got lost in all of the Yugo names, but
which I admit is it's not hard.
Yeah,
there's a lot of names here.
No, okay, that's it. That's enough.
Right, so see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.